Hey, what's up? This is Suli McCullough, and we're here at the Comedy and Magic Club, and this is another episode of Behind the Punchline. Okay, first question. How did I first get into stand-up comedy? I actually have a really interesting story. I was a student at UCLA. I always wanted to do comedy. I used to really pay attention to it. The late night shows, the comics on The Tonight Show and David Letterman. I really paid attention to them. They stood out to me. I thought, these people are important and their point of view is interesting and comedy has power. So that was in the back of my mind growing up. Comedy was always something that was like, I felt like my superpower. I was a student at UCLA. UCLA had a comedy club. I was a member of the comedy club. We would get together once a month, help each other with our jokes. And I actually got to open for Jerry Seinfeld my senior year at UCLA. Our school won a contest. It was a contest sponsored by chewing gum and Doritos. And the school that saved the most Doritos wrappers got a free concert from Jerry Seinfeld. Well, we ate the most Doritos and saved the wrappers. So 4 of us from the comedy club got to open for Jerry Seinfeld. And so we each did 5 minutes. And Jerry's manager, George Shapiro, was in the audience. After the show, George came up to me and said, "I think you have a lot of talent. Here's my card. Give me a call." So that's how I first got into stand-up comedy. It's pretty extraordinary. I was very lucky. How important is it for comedians to maintain authenticity and honesty in their performances? This is a great question. And I think it's subject to whatever your style of comedy is. My style of comedy is very conversational. Pretty much what you see is what you get. I think you get a little more elevated version of me on stage. But for me, I think it's super important to just be who I am. I started doing comedy at a time where it was pre-Def Jam. So I think I had the freedom to go at my own pace. You see, like, in different periods of comedy, you see different styles being popular. Like, whoever the most popular stand-up is, you can go to a comedy club and see 9 or 10 different versions of that guy. But I think if you want to make a name for yourself, it's really important to be close to who you are, unless you're playing a character. If you're going to be like, a more blown out character and that works for you, cool. I just feel personally, try and be as close to who you really are. And the reason I say that is you have to live with yourself long after you get off stage. So that's how I feel about honesty. And I think also the best jokes come from the more real you are. The jokes that are my best jokes are really my truest jokes. It's my lived experience. That's the best way to draw from your comedy. And then your comedy doesn't sound like anybody else's. So be honest, be who you are, and you'll be great. Who were your comedic influences and why? Great question. When I was coming up in high school, it was when Eddie Murphy was on SNL. And Eddie was blowing up in a way that it's hard to describe in this modern era of comedy. Like, I guess you could say Kevin Hart is like a different version of Eddie Murphy, but that's in the context of other big comics. Eddie was the only one at the time. He was young. He was blowing up on SNL. Like, he was the guy that I was in high school, like, jealous of Eddie Murphy. I was like, man, he is living the life that I want. So that was a huge, huge influence coming up. I just liked the way he carried himself. He was cool, like, comedy was like, it just was like, yo, I want that. So he was a big influence. The more you do it, I think you also kind of study the craft And so my influences changed the more I knew. Like I started off, super Eddie Murphy fan. I'm still a big Eddie Murphy fan. Once I started researching and doing my comedy homework, I started to fall in love with Richard Pryor, who I think is the godfather of comedy. Over the course of my comedy career, I've had other influences. I really always liked Woody Allen's style because he was like nerdy but cool and smart. So that was another big influence. I was lucky enough to have a great friendship and mentorship with Gary Shandling. He was another influence. I have to mention the Wayans family, all 90 of them. They were big influences. Coming up in the comedy clubs, we all kind of started around the same time, and that was like a great support system, and I learned good technique for them. Jerry Seinfeld is a great influence. I was a writer on The Tonight Show, so of course Jay Leno is an influence. I'm very lucky. I think as a stand-up, you're in this amazing world where you're exposed to all these talents, and you do yourself a disservice if you don't try and learn from the people that you're around. So those are some of my influences. Do you have any comedic influences from outside of the stand-up comedy world, such as actors and writers? Yes, I do. I also have a background as an actor and a writer, so I am influenced by writers. I am influenced by actors, and they're not comedic at all, but I do like their approach to the craft. And stand-up is a craft, so you do have to approach it as such. I'm a big fan of, probably one of my favorite actors is Sean Penn. And that seems like it would be a weird influence to have as a stand-up, but I like his work as an actor. I liked his approach. I like the fact that when he's not acting, he's doing work that helps people. So he was a big influence. I got to meet Sean Penn through Gary Shandling, and we clicked, which was very cool. So yeah, he's an influence. I think you can, like I said, I like to draw a little bit from everybody. I actually use a lot of musicians as influences too. When I'm writing, I'll listen to my favorite albums for inspiration. And great writers. Like I'm a big Stevie Wonder fan, so I'll listen to Stevie Wonder and hopefully try and match that level of genius, even though it's next to impossible. But at least if you surround yourself with people that you respect and admire, I think it helps you as you try and make your mark creatively. All right, how important is it for comedians to stay up to date with current events and pop culture references? I think it's really important. I think you are, the more you know, it's good to know a little bit about everything. I'm going to say that. You're standing up on stage, you're talking to audiences are made up for people that have different backgrounds, and it never hurts to know a little bit about everything. So, I know for me, like I said, I'm a stand-up first, but I've also had experiences as an actor and as a writer. I spent a year as a writer on The Tonight Show, which was all current events based. So I was writing, monologue jokes for Jay Leno, and, I had to read the paper. Like going to work every day, I would read 4 or 5 different papers, just so you knew what the stories of the day were. And I got really proficient at writing current events jokes. You write a setup, you write a punchline. So it's important to know what's going on in the world. Like, I think it helps you when you're on stage, even if your act isn't like that. Your act can be, point of view stories. But as long as you know what's going on in the world, it just makes you more relevant. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to go on stage and talk about something and not know that something catastrophic has happened in the world, because then you just look like an idiot. Yeah. So yeah, it's important to know current events and pop culture. You know what I mean? Even if you don't, even if you don't listen to Taylor Swift, you better know who Taylor Swift is, okay? All right, what advice would I give to aspiring comedians just starting out? I started doing comedy when I was in college. I graduated college in 90, so I've been doing it for a minute. I would say if you're just starting out, watch as much comedy as you can. Like when I started out, I would spend time in the back of the comedy clubs, at the Improv and the Laugh Factory, and I would just sit in the back of the room hoping to get on stage. I wouldn't even be booked sometimes, so I would watch the entire lineup. There would be comics that I liked, some comics that weren't my style, but it's important to watch everybody and see what the bar is. See how good you have to be just to be in the game. It's a form of studying. If this is going to be your passion and your craft, you got to do your homework. So that means watch people. Watch people you don't like, because you're going to learn something from them. I remember starting out early on, Sinbad gave me a great piece of advice. He said, you're going to learn more on the nights that you do poorly than when you do well. And at that time, I didn't quite understand what he meant by that, because, you want to be great all the time. But it's those nights that you don't do well that you have to go back to the drawing board and really figure out the why. Why didn't you do well? And those nights reset you to do better the next time. Like, it's really like comedy, you're only as good as your last set, which is, the great equalizer of this business. You know what I mean? Like, you can't get too high on your highs or too low on your lows, because this is a marathon and you're going to be in this for a minute. So that's one piece of advice I would give comics starting out. Another one, and this is just a side note of something I've been experiencing lately. If you see somebody that you like and they've got a little level of notoriety, let them invite you into the conversation and don't force your way into it. I've worked some clubs recently where these starting out comics have kind of like bombarded themselves with forcing a friendship, and I just don't get down like that. Like, let me see what you do. Let's have an authentic connection, and then I'm going to be your biggest supporter. But you can't force that. It has to happen organically. So those are two pieces of advice to a comic starting out. Oh, also, here's the last one. I made a documentary that I produced that I spent 4 years making, a passion project called Dying Laughing. Watch Dying Laughing. If you want to know what it is about being a stand-up, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the trials and tribulations, that documentary has the answers. What's the most unusual or unique location where you've performed stand-up comedy? I actually have a great one for this. I got booked to perform in Lake Havasu one year, right? And it was during spring break. And I don't know if you know anything about Lake Havasu, but it's a lake. There are people on the beach in bikinis. It is a full-on party. They are drinking kegs. Like, if you're going to put a comedy club somewhere or a comedy show, Lake Havasu is not the place for the show. So I remember we took 2 different planes, right, to get there. And the show was poolside, like out by the pool, right? And they didn't have a stage, and everybody's in bikinis, and they're like, they're full on spring break partying, and we're dressed in regular clothes, right? So we're already standing out. It was a hilarious comedy show because it was so non-comedy. Like, they didn't need a comedy show that weekend. They had enough going on. So that was one of the weirdest places I've ever performed, was poolside in Lake Havasu. I don't recommend that, by the way. And if you are going to perform poolside in Lake Havasu, bring your swim trunks. You know what I mean? Like, bring your flip-flops and swim trunks. Like, be in the mix of what people were doing, because we were just weirdos forcing a comedy show in Lake Havasu.
Do you remember how long that you've been playing here at the Comedy Magic Club?
I do, because right around when I first started performing here, it was as I told you that I was discovered at UCLA. We had a comedy club. I opened for Jerry Seinfeld, me and 3 other guys from the comedy club. We each did 5 minutes. His manager, George Shapiro, was in the audience, approached me after the show, gave me his card, and said, give me a call. I think you have a lot of talent. So I was a junior in college. This is how naive I was. I knew I wanted to be a stand-up, and that was my goal, right? I didn't know who George Shapiro was. I had one friend that was a comic that was a little more experienced and in the loop. I remember I called him that night and I said, this guy, George Shapiro, gave me his card. Is he legit? And my friend Jordan Brady, who's now a director, he said, are you kidding? That's one of the 3 biggest managers in comedy. And for some reason, I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was talking about. So even though I was talking to a friend, I downplayed it and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I think I'm going to give him a call because he gave me his card. I don't even know why I felt the need to play cool in that moment. So I don't think I slept that night. And that next morning, I called him at like 9 a.m. And I was like, this is also how naive I was. My best friend, his name is Chris Spencer, accomplished stand-up director, writer as well. I said, yeah, I'd love to come in and meet. And my friend Chris does comedy too. Can I bring him to the meeting? So not only was I, super excited to get this meeting, but I was also trying to hook up a friend, which just goes to show you how naive I was. So George Shapiro took the meeting with both of us and ended up signing me, and that's how I got started in comedy. When I got signed by George Shapiro, I was ready to drop out of school, right? I was like, yo, I've got my goal. This is confirmation that I'm really going to be a stand-up comedian, and let's get to it, right? Like I was ready to, if I was an athlete, I would have declared hardships and went into the draft. So George was great because he was like, we realize that you still have a year left of school. We want you to finish school, and we'll make some calls and see if we can get you emceeing at the bigger clubs. And so with about a year left of school, I started occasionally emceeing here. So I got my feet wet. And then when I graduated, I started to MC a little more. So I really did start at the most basic level. But this club is like, there's C clubs, there's B clubs, there's A clubs, and then there's the Comedy and Magic Club. So this club is the best of the best. So even though I came in as an MC, it was big time. You know what I mean? And it was great because I got to learn by watching all the best. So that's when I started. I started when I was really young, in my early 20s. Fast forward, it's been 30 years. This is one of those clubs that, I started at. And so whenever I'm in this club and in this green room or walking in these hallways, I remember that young dude that was just happy that this was a dream that came true.
You opened for Jay Leno tonight.
I did. I opened for Jay Leno tonight, which is always very special. Special for me for a couple reasons. One, Jay is a legend in comedy. And then secondly, it's special for me because I spent a year as a monologue writer on The Tonight Show. I got hired to be a monologue writer the year President Obama got the nomination to be president. So that was a very interesting time in American culture. And an executive at NBC said, hey, there's a chance we may have the first Black president. We should probably have a writer of color on the Tonight Show staff. So they had a diversity department at NBC. They didn't have anybody in the diversity department that they felt could do the job. Jack Cohen was a writer on The Tonight Show, and he recommended me. At the time, I was working as a producer on Last Comic Standing, and I I had to submit a page of monologue jokes. I took a meeting with the head writer of The Tonight Show, and I guess the jokes were good enough, and my interview was good, and I got hired as a monologue writer on The Tonight Show. So I spent a year as one of Jay's writers on The Tonight Show. His last year, his first stint as the host of The Tonight Show, he was the host for 17 years, and that final year, I was a monologue writer on the show. So it's always a full circle moment for me to come here at this club that I have so much history with, and to just perform as a stand-up with Jay Leno. The Tonight Show was a very, when I think about that job, I feel like I honestly got paid to go to grad school, because I learned how to be a better writer and a better performer, and writing on a nightly talk show like that just strengthened me as a performer and a writer. So I'm always very grateful when I get to work with Jay Leno.
But wait, you also shared the stage with Arsenio Hall.
That's right. That's right.
Tell us, how did you feel when you got the call from Richard?
Well, you know what? That's another one where, like I said, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to work with these legends in comedy, and they saw me early on, and they've kind of watched my career blossom into what it is. Like, Arsenio's phenomenal. Like, I did stand up on the Arsenio Hall show, and I remember, they had a talent coordinator that had to basically say you were ready to be on that show. So I remember I showcased to do the Arsenio Hall show about 5 or 6 times, and for some reason this talent coordinator was like, it's almost there, but I don't think he's ready. So I remember I got booked to do the Edinburgh Comedy Festival in Scotland. So I left to go to Scotland and do shows for 6 weeks in Scotland, right? And when I came back from Scotland, Arsenio came to a club in Hollywood to watch me, because they were going to book me that week on the show. And after all those other times of showcasing and spending all that time in Scotland performing, I was beyond ready. And the coolest thing about Arsenio was, I remember he was sitting upstairs watching my set, and afterwards he came up to me and he's like, dude, you are beyond ready. You're going to crush it. And it was just such a great moment to be validated by Arsenio Hall. One of the things that I think is so great about the show that he does here at the Comedy and Magic Club is you get a really great reminder as to how talented he is. First of all, he whips this audience into a frenzy like nobody I've ever seen. He's so charismatic, he's so likable that people are here to have a good time. And then you get his stand-up, and then he sets up comics that he likes. So it is a no-lose situation. Like, the audience response and the love that you get doing an Arsenio Hall and Friends show, you almost don't want to do stand-up for a couple weeks afterwards, because it's such a high and it feels that good. So that's one of the great things about Arsenio. And the dude was in Coming to America. I mean, come on.